What's more valuable, $500,000 in cash or a meal seasoned with the wisdom of a luminary? This is the tantalizing question that sparked the birth of a groundbreaking show, Lunch with the Luminary.
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Lunch with a Luminary. I'm Jackie Taylor, your host, and I'm really excited to have you share in the lunch conversation today. So we talk a lot at Business Boost Society about government contracting and connecting to the right relationships. But, we talk in higher terms at times, and in BBS, we want to make sure that we're giving you brass tacks information. So here on Lunch with the Luminary today, the luminary that we're going to talk to has several years experience in federal government, working specifically with small businesses. And today, he is the Chief Procurement Officer, the first Black Chief Procurement Officer for the state of Maryland. I want you guys to help me welcome Wallace Sermons to lunch with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jackie.
Of course. I'm so happy you decided to join me. So today's lunch is from a great little food truck called Flavor on a Fork Chicken and Waffles. So what did you get?
It looks amazing. So I went for the strawberry cream type of waffle. Didn't have breakfast yet. I figured this could kind of get me through the breakfast brunch situation, but it looks delightful.
You're making us brunch with a luminary today.
Oh,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I got the salted caramel, and we got the chicken tenders, so I can't wait to dig in. But why don't you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about your background and where you grew up?
So there's always a complicated question. You figure for most it would be easy, but for me, I'm an Army brat and Air Force veteran myself. So born in Dothan, Alabama, lived in Germany, but I grew up, right? Anytime someone asks, I grew up in Burtonsville, Maryland, right? If you're not familiar with Burtonsville, you may be familiar with Silver Spring, kind of the extension of it.
Okay. So now you are doing amazing things. You're appointed by the governor, you're working in state government, you've worked in federal government for a while. Did you grow up with parents who kind of worked in government also and kind of steered you in that direction?
That's the thing. I'm glad you asked that question. I grew up in a house of love, but not really exposed to a lot of things that I've been exposed to throughout my career, right? I don't think anyone ever says, or any child ever says, I want to go into procurement or I want to be a chief procurement officer, right? I didn't even understand what the government space truly looked like at that point. I thought the government was full of experts themselves and they filled all the requirements. I had no idea of this whole contracting landscape. So for me, I always wanted to be successful. I've always had a knack or enjoyed business, but it's really exposure throughout my career that has led me to positions that I can be impactful in.
I recall people saying in the community, well, you want to get that good government job. Was that something that people encouraged?
You know what? I think I may have heard that once or twice. But I did grow up in the community, so we moved from Washington D.C. to Burtonsville, Maryland. I grew up in a pretty progressive community, right? So there were 2-parent households in the community. There was doctors, lawyers, business owners. So I looked at it, and to be honest, it kind of gave me the perspective is you can do anything. I just need to figure out what that anything was, right? I don't know if I would have just said the good government job and just went from there, which, it is a good earning, good wages for employees, but I wanted to do something, just didn't know exactly what it was at the time.
You talk about exposure. And that's a theme, right, within our entrepreneurial community, because many of our entrepreneurs are first generation entrepreneurs. They were not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They didn't have a rich uncle. And so their exposure is very deliberate. They put themselves in rooms and in communities, just like Business Boost Society. They put themselves in communities in order to make sure they get exposed to what they need to. But you shared, you were in a community where you saw doctors and lawyers. So you had the foundation of loving your home, and then you had exposure to what the art of the possible was from other people. But what do you think made that connection to make you believe, I see it, I know it exists, and it's something that I could actually achieve?
I'm gonna be honest with you. It's just probably trial and error. Like I graduated high school, not really knowing exactly what my footprint in the future would look like. I went to the Air Force, and I've had so many jobs, right? Great careers until something just kind of stuck. But I started off in the Air Force as an air traffic controller, right? Radar approach control. I left the Air Force and I stumbled upon a job at a company called Hughes Network Systems, where I kind of went through the ranks of help desk to supervisor and then ultimately becoming a network engineer there, still not really knowing where life would take me. I did go venture out towards entrepreneurship in California with some friends of mine trying to live that actual dream right on the West Coast. And that's when it kind of transitioned. And I met a gentleman who at the time was a political appointee under the Obama administration. And he told me about really government contracts. He told me that was, he told me about acquisitions and that as that being a field underneath him. And as I started to learn more about that field, I really started. So I almost transitioned to a point of coming in as an intern and then working my way through the ranks. So very different story than some who maybe got the business degree or the law degree and went into the space. I literally grabbed the degrees as I gravitated towards a certain area.
But I think there's so much blessing in that. I just want to sit in that for a while because you talked about being grounded in love and support in a 2-family household. And you felt you had the permission to try different things. One thing you said in the beginning of our conversation was, I didn't know exactly what I wanted, but I knew that I wanted to be successful. So once you have that clear, concise mental picture of where you see yourself in the world, how you define yourself in the world, and you have that foundation and support, you had the permission to try different things, to try, to fail, to pivot, to make changes. And then you went to entrepreneurship. I don't know about you, but I think the best entrepreneurs are those that have gone wide and tried multiple things, because as an entrepreneur, you need to put all that into your toolkit. Right?
No, I totally agree. And I got to take a step back because I got to give more credit to my mother here. I grew up in a single family household with just my mother, but that love was there telling me I can do anything in this world. And to be honest with you, as I kind of looked and I gravitated through these different spaces, you learn different things. And I always ask questions. Even when I was at Hughes, when I was the network engineer, I asked the question, who is the guy who gets the call and let me know that all these enterprise sites are down, right? Who's managing the customer expectations, managing that portfolio, and what is it about that individual that distinguishes themselves? And I looked and I kind of gravitated even my educational pursuits in those directions. What does it take to get to the next level? And the thing about exposure is as you're trying out different things, you're able to look to ask yourself, what is next? Because until you get there, you don't know that there is truly a next, right? So even now in my career, as I get to different levels, I'm able to be impactful in different environments for different constituents. I look around, I learn different things, and I ask myself, what's next? But it's the exposure from the position, how I'm positioned currently that allows me to look forward.
Right. That exposure thing, I think it makes such a big difference. When I was a partner with one of the big 4 firms, we would interview the students who were coming out of college for potential roles, either internships that would step them into full-time roles. And when I tell you there was a stark difference between those students who could provide their resume, and this is a college student's resume, that would say, I spent this summer at Deloitte, I've spent this summer at Ernst & Young, I spent this summer at McKinsey, and now I would like another position with your firm. From the resumes of the college students who said, I worked at Burger King, I worked in the school library, I was a resident advisor. And I'm not even going to tell you the racial background of each of those, you could guess. But that, to me, was a perfect example of exposure or lack of exposure. So now who's going to get the job, Wallace?
Jackie, if you see me smiling profusely here, it's literally because I worked at the Burger King. I worked at the KFC, right?
Look at you now.
But again, it's this exposure and opportunity later that came. But it wasn't the same as my counterparts who had the father who had the lobbying firm who could easily get me to an internship.
Make a phone.
I didn't have those type of opportunities, and I'm saying I wouldn't tell anyone to let that limit them, but that is something that supports. So if you have those opportunities, you understand what true business acumen looks like. You understand how to navigate through those spaces.
And the
it's
language,
totally different.
The language. So
Absolutely.
I ask questions, interviewing questions to that first candidate versus asking the second candidate. That first candidate is able to reference experiences, terminologies, client interactions that second candidate can only speak to in the future of what could possibly be. But I was in that interviewing seat the same way you are in a leadership seat. So I know how to look beyond what's on the paper and look at the potential of the potential candidate, but everybody's not in that spot. Everybody's not in that position.
But I think, to be honest with you, someone told me once, we make it to these positions for a reason, right? So as we make it to these positions, we have to look past the standard resumes, opportunities that may exist for some, and look to see real skills and capabilities based on the individual at hand, right? And like I am a firm believer in the past being a predictor of the future, but it doesn't necessarily have to relate to the specific job that you worked at. Your character, your ability, how you performed in positions that you have held, that tells me a lot. And some of my best employees have not hailed from places like Princeton or Harvard. They literally, some of them have not had any college degree at all, but they've had the vigor and they've had the resilience and they've moved forward. So
the mark of a true leader is being able to look around, see around corners, and be able to say, you may not have it in your resume, you may not have it in your history, but I can see the potential based on the characteristics that you're putting in front of me now. And so I'm glad that you, myself, and so many others are in a position to be able to do that. Otherwise, inequity is going to continue for so long. So when I think about small businesses or emerging businesses, and you worked at the Small Business Administration, could you tell the difference between the CEOs that had exposures that would be helpful versus those that were kind of like pulling themselves up by the bootstraps?
I think it's really the support system that they have and the networks. It's hard breaking into an industry, and let's be honest, this is a super important topic. 99% of businesses are small businesses in the United States. And the problem is when we have these businesses, especially minority-owned businesses, that have not had the same access to opportunities, access to capital, and just the resources, they're kind of starting off in a sometimes unattainable position. And it's one of those things where when businesses come in, even from, I want to say, the perspective of why I believe we really have affirmative action programs, if the person who holds the purse, the program official, does not look like you, sometimes there's those cultural differences. They may not understand you. In the minority community, we're still trying to assimilate to some things that, culturally just don't exist in our space, right?
Cultural bias is real.
Absolutely. So I've seen businesses struggle just to kind of enter the door, and they're more than capable firms. And I feel like they sometimes have to jump through hoops. And that's one of the things that this administration that I work for, they're putting it into. Right? I have one of the best governors, the best governor, actually. Let me just state it here, right? The best governor in the country, Governor Wes Moore, who literally, we use the term a lot in our cultural stance on business, and that is exactly what he does, right? The way that he approaches running this administration, governing with such passion, such vigor, and such data-driven, right? Data-driven thoughts is just amazing. And it's exceptional to see the leadership at that level for a state. So what he's doing, what he has charged me under this administration to do, heading the Office of State Procurement, looking at these inequities, ensuring that minority-owned firms, veteran-owned firms have a seat at the table. You don't really see this coming out of administration. Well, you didn't see it coming out of administrations in the past, and you don't see this globally in the country.
Yeah, that's why he brought you on board. So when you talk about data, right? $800 billion in spend across the federal government, give or take. And, the data shows that less than, 1%, I think it's less than 1.3% of Black businesses have access to that money, right? That spend. So that means there's a whole lot of opportunity for our Black and brown businesses to take advantage of federal government contracting. Now, I need you to give us the skinny. You worked at the Small Business Administration. Every time a business owner turns around, they get directed to 800 numbers and websites, and they get directed to the SBA. So help our viewers and listeners navigate. You were there, right? How do they truly take advantage of what's available at SBA?
To be honest, they have to work the resources, right? There's a finite number of resources. When I was there overseeing the Office of Government Contracting, had averaged about 40 to 45 Procurement Center Representatives. Those are the ones that review all of the procurements that come out of the federal government, that ensure that those are set aside for small businesses or different socioeconomic concerns. But when they see requirements, they have to look down the pipeline and reach out to resources like Procurement Center Representatives and let them know, there's two or more of us, right? This is the whole rule of two, that can do this work. we need you to set this aside, whether you're setting it aside for small business or you're setting it aside for a socioeconomic characteristics such as, or categories such as women-owned small business, economically disadvantaged, women-owned small business, services able veteran, the list, right? The 8A program, but they got to get in front of it, right? The workforce is not going to be able to see every single requirement that comes down the pipeline or know exactly which businesses are interested. Right. The system's not set up that way. So you have to work with the resources and let them know when there's a requirement that interests you and tell them, this requirement, there's a few of us that we're highly capable to do this requirement and we need this set aside. Also working with the resources such as Apex Accelerators, formerly known as PTACs, and the Small Business Development Centers, because these are taxpayer dollars. The Apex Accelerators are funded out of DOD. They used to be housed at the Defense Logistics Agency. Now the program is housed at DOD proper. And the same thing with the Small Business Development Centers. That funding for those programs that are supposed to be resources for small businesses, the funding comes from the Small Business Administration, right? The funding from Congress is appropriated to SBA for the use to help develop and train businesses. So whether they're helping them develop their business or seek opportunities, you got to tell them exactly what you need them to do for you, and you got to push forward in that direction.
I used to tell my kids when you go to school and they say, well, I don't understand it. Well, why didn't you ask for an explanation of that particular problem? Well, I was confused. And I would tell them that teacher gets paid to make sure that you are absorbing the information that they are communicating. That is their job. They get paid to do it. You make sure that you get the same way you're in a store, you pay and you extend your currency and you get a product or service. I want you to think of it that way. And what I hear you saying is our business owners need to think of it the same way. Our taxpayer dollars are leveraged for SCORE, for SBA, for DOD, for the Apex Accelerator. So our business owners listening should treat that as a consultant that is paid and get everything you can from a value standpoint.
Even further at the state level, the minority business enterprise liaisons, the small business enterprise liaisons, and the veteran small business enterprise liaisons for the state of Maryland, they are paid to support our businesses, right? Our socioeconomic footprint. We have a 29% aspirational goal that we're trying to get to, right? We're looking at our numbers and we're trying to work with the agencies to get there. But if there's requirements coming down the pipeline, I need firms to reach out to these liaisons and say, I need introductions to program officials. I want to do a capabilities brief to let them know my skill set. I want to have conversations about the program and what's coming down the pipeline. We even have posted a budget and brief. It's not a budget and brief like you see in the federal government, but on the Department of Budget and Management, DBM's website, it shows what the spend is going to be for the state. If they see something there that's germane to their bottom line, they need to reach out to their advocates, right? Reach out to the procurement officers, ask questions about requirements in certain phase, right? But also reach out to those liaisons and let them know, we think this is suitable for us to perform on, and we want more information about that requirement.
And that's why you gave all that great information to all the folks here at InvestFest 2024. But you gave homework to do. So we're going to let them do that homework, and we're going to dive into our lunch. So
I can't wait.
Let's do this.